This is a journey into time. A journey which along the way will bring to you new colors, new dimensions, new values. When all is ready, I throw this switch. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special news bulletin. What once was old can become brand new. Oh my gosh. Rehabs turn me on. Welcome to Building Back the Block with Bell, Sharon Bell. It's so fresh. My gosh. Rehabs turn me on. Welcome to Building Back the Block with Bell, Sharon Bell. It's so fresh. It's so fresh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sharon Bell. I am Sharon Bell, I should say, and we are Building Back the Block. This is a series that will focus on different rehabs, remodeling, investors' approach to buying and renovating properties here in Louisville. As we get started, I am going to talk about the West End. The West End is kind of has a special spot in my heart because it's where my grandmother grew up in Beecher Terrace, and I've seen so many changes to the West End, and I wanted to take some time to talk about it. As this series of videos goes forward, we will talk about different neighborhoods, talking about Shively and Churchill Downs, and then moving into other ends of town. But right now I want to start with the West End, which is all about redlining. The history of how the West End became the West End, or how urban areas have come about in every city, is pretty clear. You can go anywhere in any city across the United States and you find areas that are underdeveloped and full of what they call bad neighborhoods. And a lot of times people feel like it's the people who live in those neighborhoods that make them bad, but it's actually the way it was designed. And so we're going to do a little history lesson on redlining, racism, capitalism, and real estate. So a lot of people were asking me, why did I want to talk about redlining? And one of the main reasons why is because real estate and the real estate industry was instrumental in making redlining what it was today. So why did redlining happen? Let's talk about it first. So of course, back in the 17th century, as slavery was ending after the Civil War, blacks and whites lived together. They did the fields together, they hung out in the evenings together, they got married. So yes, black and white love is not anything new. But then, you know, as we got into the 18th century, and there were problems with that. White people primarily, but I'm sure some blacks as well, didn't like the fact that blacks and whites were living in harmony together. So they started creating legislation. So following the Civil War in 1865, many of the high-ranking Confederate officers immigrated toward Kentucky and ended up in Louisville. And they formed Confederate supremacy, and they basically put themselves in positions of power. Because as you can imagine, when the war was ending, there was a lot of chaos in the southern states where slavery had been outlawed. And so while things were in a state of disarray, Caucasians put themselves in charge. So of course, they wanted the rules to be the way they wanted it, just to put it kind of simply. But they wanted everything to be done legally. So they started writing laws. You've heard of Jim Crow laws. You've heard of several, too numerous to name today. And one of the things they did once they created these laws is they had to have a way to enforce them. And there we go with the police force. So the police were instrumental in enforcing all of the Jim Crow laws and the other laws that kept us segregated. So they basically use zoning, Federal Housing Administration, which created redlining, urban renewal, and the Interstate Act to kind of keep us all apart. And the goal was to keep people in their place, but legally. So you had gentrification, which is something we're talking about every day here in Louisville. But then there was urban renewal. And that's where they basically created what is called as the ninth, here in Louisville, is called the 9th Street Divide. And the purpose of redlining, let's just talk a little bit about the purpose of redlining. The purpose of redlining of residential areas was to kind of grade each neighborhood. So if you're looking for a house here in Louisville now, you'll have people sometimes say, is this a good neighborhood? And they want to live in a good neighborhood. Well, neighborhoods were graded A to D. And what made them decide what was a D-class neighborhood or an A-class neighborhood was primarily how many people of color lived in the neighborhood. So you have, like the Chickasaw neighborhood was in close proximity to blacks. So that would have gotten a D. Then you had Phoenix Hill, Butchertown, Clifton Heights. Some of those were better because the Negro population was segregated to the south. Then you have Park Hill and Algonquin, where the Negroes were kind of had a very, what they would classify as a bad balance because there were too many of them. And then in Russell and Portland, believe it or not, it was a mixed population. It was kind of, could go either way. But as time has passed, that has gone different ways. And I encourage you to do your own research on this if any of what I'm saying interests you, because I'm scratching the surface and I'm just talking about this on a very top line level. But if you've ever heard of the phrase, the 9th Street Divide. So urban renewal is also referred to as Negro removal. So 9th Street basically set the parameters for where blacks were okay, and those neighborhoods would get graded C level, D level, and then where they were not allowed, which would be anything on the other side of 9th Street, so going into the central business district. They didn't want blacks to be in the central business district. And I have a video that I'd like to show you and just have you look at that. That really explains it way better than I can. I think it was 12.
Approaching the area that was cleared by urban renewal. From here on west, for maybe 3/4 of a mile in each direction, was almost all torn down by urban redevelopment. See, this was all just solid build-up, small, modest brick houses and brick stores. There are few churches left, a few things, and there are many new buildings and a lot of open space. As you can see, a lot of it hasn't been built on. Nobody knows what's going to happen there. At least a few of the urban renewal types, the establishment types that promoted it, their motive was, as they told me, to drive the Negro back from the central area. They felt that way downtown wouldn't become the Black Belt. It was a childish idea because the streets are still open, and it was a cruel thing. And, well, later, as you all know, urban renewal was called Negro removal by the Negroes and by the people who were sympathetic with them. And that's what it was. It almost always tore down the homes of black people or poor people. Well, now comes Spaghetti Junction. There's one of the ramps up. Remember the cartoon in New York, I guess it was, said that Expressway certainly solved the problem with the central area, traffic problem, but whatever became of the central area? Well, this thing takes in, well, I don't know, several hundred acres, and just chews the whole neighborhood up. Because when the expressway goes through, the churches lose half their communicants, or a third. The neighborhood taverns lose their customers, and everything disintegrates. A lot of them is driven out by the expressway, so daughter moves away. I don't think you'll ever have anything but a slum, partly boarded up, on each side of most expressways through cities. Now we're going on to these things. You see, cities are dominated by absentee owners. The power, the establishment exists always, usually on the east side of the city, outside. And they make the decisions within the city. Consciously and unconsciously, they mine the city just as if it was a strip mine. And it's just as disastrous and just as hard to affect now. Nobody means any harm. They're doing what comes naturally, the things they think are good and important, good for their companies, good for them. But the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And they don't realize that they're going to cut their own throats in the long run, because without the city, the suburbs are a mess.
So the purpose of the 9th Street Divide was accomplished, and you can see now the difference between Russell before urban renewal and after. So before it was businesses, homes, now it's parking lots and you know, nothing. So the goal was achieved to, and you can see it today, and you can see it in every city. This is not a Louisville thing. But as you travel west through downtown, you get less and less businesses. I think there's one grocery store left at 28th and Broadway, because there were 2 or 3 Krogers in the West End. Now there's one. And I think the only reason why that's there is because Kroger Company would hear all kind of backlash from the community if they tried to close it. But they are trying to fix some of that, and there are some dollars coming back into our neighborhoods. So that's the flip side of it. So I have some guests that are going to come on, and they're going to talk to us about redlining, the purposes, what it did, how we can kind of combat some of those issues. But as we start to renew our west areas, another thing started to emerge when I was doing my studies. So again, you got to keep in mind that the police force has always been the arm of the government that actually made sure the laws take place. So, you know, you're only allowed to drive 55. Who stops you from driving 75? The police. So in everything that our government puts in place, every law, every procedure, every rule, the police department are the ones who enforce it. So as I was reading some information, and so as we got into like 2017, going into COVID, there was a desire to renew many areas in the West End. And along with those desires came a heightened use of nuisance laws. So the focus of a nuisance law was originally prostitution, alcohol, gambling, felonious activities, as they say. But slowly but surely, it became, as we got further, like closer to 2018, things that would have been considered misdemeanor crimes started becoming higher penalty crimes, where they were trying to force people out of particular properties. So let me talk a little bit about the nuisance laws. So the nuisance laws are designed to attach to a particular property. So if you live in a property and your house is cited for being a public nuisance, you can be evicted from the property or cited with penalties and fines. A lot of the properties in the West End are owned by property owners who don't live in them. So if I'm a property owner and my property is cited with a nuisance uh, fine, the easiest thing for me to do is to get that tenant out. So if that tenant was caught with a misdemeanor, drug felony or prostitution, something like that, is to get them out. So there was a increase on the amount of nuisance convictions or nuisance fines that were going to people who own properties in certain areas. So that was creating a lot of evictions, which is no money in evictions. Let me tell you that. If you own a piece of property and you can't keep a tenant in it for whatever reasons, because it was basically getting targeted by the police, and the police would just come and bother the residents and see what they're doing. Oddly enough, these nuisance laws were part of what kind of created the Breonna Taylor issue, because the police were targeting that neighborhood and they were doing, what do they call that? No-knock warrants, where they just go in and see what you're doing and try to find stuff that you're doing that would fall into these laws so you could get evicted. But why would they want people to get evicted? Well, follow the money. So as the crackdown came on properties that had activity going on that created a nuisance for the neighborhood, you started having these evictions and people moving out, and then the properties became abandoned. So if you got a bunch of abandoned properties, what happens? Well, somebody has to buy them, but nobody wants to buy a property that you can't keep a tenant in, right? So then the properties become empty for long periods of time, boarded up, and the city takes them back and sells them off. Well, they sometimes sell them off in large swaths of properties to large corporations. So again, always in anything that you see happening around you, always follow the money. So as you follow the money, let's look at Chickasaw Park. Or not Chickasaw, let's look at Park Duval. This is where you saw this happening initially. Southwick was an area that I grew up in. I didn't live in Southwick, but I lived very near there. I went to Butler High School, and a lot of my friends were bused from Southwick into Butler High School and the surrounding areas. So after targeting that neighborhood over and over again, the city tore down Southwick Cotter Homes and built Park Duval. So when they built Park Duval, that's not little individuals who are buying those properties. That's not little individual investors. It's major investors, major money makers. Same thing is happening right now with Beecher Terrace. Now, this is a place where I grew up. My grandmother lived in Beecher Terrace right across from the baseball diamond, and we played in that baseball diamond as kids almost every weekend. And again, when they tear those places down, they're not getting rehabbed by mom and pop owners. No one's buying those properties. There's major corporations. So over $30 million was spent to rehab these HUD projects. And there's a project called Vision Russell. All of those are major projects. So what is interesting is if you follow the money where the ordinances for the nuisance clauses came in the most are the areas where all the big investors were. And we all know, the Donald Trumps of the world, they all work together. So the laws work to get the people out of the houses, devalue the neighborhood, and then major corporations come in and remodel. There was a major corporation that bought about 400 properties last year. And slowly but surely, I'm seeing all those properties come back on the market well above market rate. And it seems like a good thing. Hey, they're remodeling the houses, but they get them for next to nothing. they're getting a house for $20,000 and then they're reselling it, and I can show you where this is actually happening. They're reselling it for 140 and 150. Well, most of the people who live in those neighborhoods can't afford it. So then we get back to gentrification and taxes going up. And it's kind of a vicious circle. So I say all of that to say, with the West End, with redlining, with the laws and policies that we have in place, always follow the money. Everything happens for a reason. Nothing's an accident. So people who live in the West End or who are experiencing some of these issues with police, it's not by accident, and it's not you, it's by design. All of these procedures are put in place to create an opportunity for bigger businesses to make money. Right now, they're building the hospital at 28th and Broadway, and I am anxiously watching how things happen and develop around that area, because they're putting millions and millions of dollars into those areas. And what we want to see is more opportunities for individuals to own properties themselves, and there are several programs, and we'll be talking about that, to help you even use your Section 8 dollars. So you can take your Section 8 dollars and use that to buy a property. You don't have to only use it for rent. There are Metro down payment assistance. One of the major problems, a person who's making $10 to $20 an hour and they need that just to live, the major drawback is, how do you save up down payment money? Well, Metro government has programs in place to help you get a 20% down payment so that you don't have PMI and all these other things. All of these things is things we're going to talk about, of how, as our government is building back the West End, we can participate as individual investors and individual home owners. And that's what Building Back the Block is all about. So you're going to hear from all kind of great guests, and my next guest is going to be one of the major real estate attorneys here in Louisville. And I appreciate you giving me your time today. I've got way more data than I was able to get to, and hopefully as we go through this series, I'll get a chance to come back and kind of talk a little bit more about what I have. So thank you for your time, and please join us over the next couple of weeks, probably about 8 weeks, for Building Back the Block. I'm Sharon Bell with